I always believed death would be loud if it ever came for me, something cinematic and final. But the first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, staring at a coffee mug I didn't remember buying, and it slipped through the mail slot with a sound so soft it barely existed. Yet the moment it hit the floor, something inside my chest tightened, as if my body recognized it before my mind did. The envelope was yellowed, old-fashioned, my name written across the front in my handwriting. Not similar to it, not inspired by it, but unmistakably mine. Down to the slight tremble in the art and the uneven spacing, I'd never managed to fix no matter how many scripts or letters I'd written over the years. And for a long moment, I just stood there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside, telling myself this was a joke, a coincidence, some cruel fan trick. Anything except what my hands were already shaking to admit. I picked it up, felt the paper between my fingers, real and textured and worn like it had traveled farther than a mailbox. And when I turned it over, my breath caught, because in the corner where a return address should have been, there were only 3 words written smaller, tighter, almost afraid. You wrote this. I sat at the kitchen table without remembering pulling the chair out. My movements slow and careful, the way you move around a sleeping child or a wild animal. And I opened the envelope with a fingertip because suddenly I was terrified of tearing it, as if whatever was inside was fragile in a way paper shouldn't be. The letter was short, just a single page folded once. And the moment I saw the date at the top, my stomach dropped so hard I thought I might be sick. It was dated 3 years from now. My heart started to race, logic scrambling for footing, but the words pulled me in anyway, each line written in my voice, my rhythm. My quiet humor stripped down to something raw. If you're reading this, it means you woke up again. It began, and I laughed once. Sharp and hollow, because that was exactly how I used to write when I was trying to soften something unbearable. You won't remember dying. I made sure of that. But please, Robin, listen to me now. Don't tell anyone about the letters. Don't trust the calm. And whatever you do, don't go back to the lake. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to put the letter down, my pulse pounding in my ears, because I had never been to a lake recently, not that I could recall. And yet the words stirred something deep and cold, like a bruise you don't remember earning but flinch from anyway. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, rereading the letter until the words blurred, checking the envelope for hidden cameras or clues or anything that would ground this in reality, but everything about it was wrong in a way that felt intentional. That night I barely slept, drifting in and out of shallow dreams where I stood waist-deep in dark water listening to my own voice echo across the surface. And when morning came, I almost convinced myself. I'd imagined the whole thing until I opened the door and found a second envelope waiting on the mat. This one was newer, the paper brighter, the ink darker. My name was written faster, more urgently, like I'd been in a hurry or afraid of being interrupted. I didn't even bother going back inside. I opened it right there in the doorway, cold air biting at my ankles, and the first line made my knees weaken. You didn't listen. That's okay. I expected that. I swallowed hard, scanning the rest. You're probably trying to make sense of this, wondering if you're sick, if this is a breakdown. It's not. You're alive. I wasn't. The world tilted. Cars passed. A neighbor waved without noticing the way my face had drained of color. They said it was an accident, the letter continued. They said you slipped. You didn't. You chose the water. I chose it because it was the only place it couldn't follow me. That night I drove without knowing where I was going until the road narrowed and the trees thickened and a familiar dread wrapped around my chest. And when the forest opened up to reveal a lake reflecting the moon like a black mirror, my hands tightened on the steering wheel as if something else were trying to take control. I hadn't been here, I told myself, yet every detail felt intimate. The crooked sign leaning toward the water, the narrow dock with one broken plank, the way the wind skimmed the surface without making a sound. I stayed in the car for a long time, breathing, arguing with myself, until my phone buzzed in my pocket. No notification. No signal. Just the screen lighting up to display a single line of text in a notes app I never used. "Don't get out." I whispered, "This isn't funny," to no one. But my voice sounded small in the dark, and when I looked up, I saw something move at the edge of the lake. Not a shape exactly, more like a distortion, as if the reflection there didn't match the world above it. I drove home shaking, heart hammering, and that was when the dreams started changing. No longer fragments, but scenes, whole moments playing out with a clarity that felt invasive. I dreamed of standing on the dock with my clothes on, pockets heavy, a calm settling over me that felt rehearsed, and I dreamed of whispering, "I'm sorry," not to the water, but to someone standing just behind me. I woke up gasping, sheets tangled around my legs, and found a third letter on my nightstand. I don't remember bringing it inside. "You're getting close now," it read. "That's dangerous. They're listening again." I pressed the paper to my chest, a sob catching in my throat, because I could feel it too, that subtle pressure in the air. That sense of being observed not by eyes, but by memory itself. "You need to remember why you went into the lake," the letter continued. "You need to remember who you were trying to protect." The fourth letter arrived soaked, the ink smeared in places like tears, and this one finally broke something open in me. "Her name is Lily," it said. "I'm sorry I took her from you. I had to hide her where even you couldn't find her." My breath shattered. I didn't have a daughter. I would remember that, wouldn't I? Yet the name echoed through me with a warmth and ache, so immediate it stole the air from my lungs. And suddenly the dreams shifted against small hands gripping mine. Laughter at the edge of the lake, a voice calling me daddy from somewhere I couldn't see. I sank to the floor, clutching the letter, and whispered, "What did you do?" To myself, to the past, to the version of me who had written these warnings. The answer came not in words, but in a memory forcing its way up, like a body breaking the surface of dark water. Me standing at the lake, Lily crying behind me as something moved beneath the surface. Something that learned voices and faces, and loved the way predators learn paths, and me realizing in a moment of terrible clarity that as long as I remembered her, as long as I loved her openly, it would never stop coming. The last letter arrived the next morning. Heavier than the rest, the paper thick and stiff. The handwriting calmer, resolved. "This is where I stop helping you," it said. "If you remember everything, it will wake completely. If you don't remember enough, she'll stay lost forever." I chose the middle. I chose to die so you could live, just ignorant enough to survive. I stared at the final line until tears blurred it beyond recognition. "I'm sorry, Robin," it ended. "But tonight, you have to choose again." Outside, the sound of water reached me from somewhere impossible, like a lake breathing just beyond the walls. And for the first time since the letters began, I understood the truth beneath them all. I hadn't been haunted by my death. I had been protected by it. And now, as the house grew quiet around me, and the calm I'd been warned about settled in like a held breath, I realized something was waiting to see which version of me would wake up tomorrow. I didn't burn the letters the way the last one told me to, even though the calm it warned me about settled over the house like a sedative, because calm has always scared me more than chaos. And that night, the quiet felt curated, deliberate, as if something had finally decided to stop rushing and start watching. So I sat at the kitchen table with every envelope laid out in a line, dates stretching forward like a timeline I was never supposed to read, and I realized with a cold, sinking certainty that the letters weren't just messages from a future version of me, but stitches holding something together. Something that would fall apart the moment I cut the thread. I read them again, slower this time. Listening to the cadence of my own words, the way you listen to a confession you're not sure you deserve to hear. And patterns emerged that I'd missed before, little omissions, careful phrasing. Jokes placed exactly where the truth would have been too sharp to survive. And it dawned on me that the version of me who wrote these letters was not trying to tell me everything. He was trying to teach me how to stop asking the wrong questions. That's when I noticed the margins' tiny marks I'd mistaken for smudges or creases arrows. Circles, a shorthand I used when I didn't trust myself to remember later. And when I followed them, they formed a map of sorts, Not of places, but of moments. The lake, the dock, the broken plank. The apology whispered to someone behind me, the weight in my pockets. And then a blank space where the ink simply stopped, as if the memory itself refused to be pinned down. I didn't drive to the lake right away because fear has a way of disguising itself as patience. But the house began to change the longer I stayed. Sounds stretching, shadows pooling where they shouldn't. And every reflective surface windows, the microwave door, the black screen of my phone started lagging just a fraction of a second behind my movements. As if the world needed an extra beat to decide which version of me it was going to show. When I finally did leave, dawn was breaking in that thin, indecisive way that makes everything look unfinished. And the road to the lake felt shorter than it had any right to be. The trees leaning inward like they were tired of pretending this was a place you could come and go from freely. I parked where I'd parked in my dreams. And the lake lay before me exactly as I remembered and exactly as I didn't. Flat, black, unbroken by ripples. Reflecting the sky so perfectly it looked like a second world waiting just beneath the surface. And standing there I understood something the letters never quite said outright. The lake wasn't a place. It was a boundary, and boundaries are only useful if you remember what they're keeping apart. I stepped onto the dock, testing each plank, my breath fogging in the cold air. And when I reached the broken one, my heart stuttered because the memory snapped into place with a clarity that hurt. Me stopping right here years ago, calculating weight and distance and resolve. Not in a panic, but with a calm that felt earned, rehearsed. The calm of a man who had already tried every other door and found them locked. "I'm here," I said out loud, not sure who I was talking to. And the water answered by dimpling once, twice, like something exhaling just under the skin. My phone buzzed in my hand, the screen lighting without signal again. A single sentence appearing in my notes in that same familiar handwriting. "If you hear her, don't answer out loud." I swallowed, throat tight, because I already knew who her was. And right on cue, a voice drifted across the lake, small and careful and impossibly near. "Daddy." It called, not from behind me, but from everywhere at once. Folded into the air the way music sometimes is. And every muscle in my body screamed to turn, to answer, to say her name like a lifeline. But the letters had taught me something too, that love spoken too loudly can become a beacon. I closed my eyes and listened instead, and the sound of her voice braided itself with other sounds. I hadn't noticed before the soft drag of something moving beneath the dock, the faint echo of a second voice trying on her tone, testing it, wearing it badly. And I understood then what I had chosen all those years ago, when I stepped into the water with my pockets full. That this thing didn't just hunt bodies. It hunted attention, memory, attachment, and it learned fastest from love. The letters weren't warnings about danger. They were instructions for silence. "I remember you," I whispered without sound, shaping the words in my mouth and letting them die there, and the lake shivered, the reflection warping as if offended. The other voice tried again, closer now, sweeter, too sweet, like sugar hiding rot. "Daddy, I'm cold." I pressed my palms together until my fingers hurt, grounding myself in pain, and followed the map in my head to the part I'd avoided, the blank space where the ink had stopped, and I let it fill. I remembered the night completely, then the storm breaking open the sky. Lily tugging at my sleeve, crying because the water scared her, and me lying to her with a smile because that's what parents do when the truth would break something irreparably. Me telling her to wait, to be quiet, to trust me, while I slipped the stuffed rabbit into my pocket because I knew she'd follow it anywhere. And I remembered the thing beneath the lake rising without ever quite surfacing, a distortion more than a shape. A hunger that reflected back whatever you gave it, magnified and wrong. I remembered realizing that as long as Lily was known, named, remembered by me as my daughter, the thing would keep finding her, and that the only way to hide her was not to move her body, but to move the idea of her, to lock her behind a door in myself so deep even I couldn't reach it without drowning first. I stepped off the dock willingly, not to die in the way people think of death, but to become a boundary, to let the lake take what it wanted most, my certainty while. I took something from it in return. The water closed over my head in memory, cold and absolute, and I felt again the moment of inversion where up and down lost meaning and sound disappeared. The moment where the thing realized I wasn't fighting it, I was bargaining. And the bargain was simple and brutal. Take my life as it exists now. Let me wake again without the map, and in exchange I will carry her where you can't see. The thing accepted because predators always do when they think they've won. And when I surfaced hours later on the shore, lungs burning, clothes heavy, I was already forgetting in the careful, the surgical way the letters describe, already letting the edges of Lily blur until only the ache remained. And the ache was useless to the thing because ache doesn't point anywhere. Back in the present. Standing on the dock, I opened my eyes and let the memory settle without chasing it further. Because chasing is how it hears you, and I spoke again without sound. Shaping my mouth around the truth like a prayer I didn't want overheard. You're safe, I told her. And this time, the water went still. Too still, as if listening had cost it something. The second voice grew angry then, the sweetness peeling away to reveal impatience. And the surface of the lake bulged, reflections tearing like wet paper. Give her back, the notes app demanded. The words pressing into the glass, as if written from the inside. And for the first time I understood the final line of the last letter not as a threat, but as an invitation. Tonight, you have to choose again. I stepped closer to the broken plank and felt the familiar pull at my ankles. The lake recognizing the weight it had been trained to expect, and I realized the choice wasn't between remembering and forgetting. It was between speaking and holding, between naming and carrying, and that the only way to keep the bargain intact was to refuse the performance it wanted. So I sat down on the dock instead, legs dangling above the black mirror. Right? And I did something I hadn't done in years. I waited without asking for anything in return. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The lake tested me with ripples and whispers and stolen tones, and each time I let them pass through me without response. Holding Lily where the letters had taught me to hold her, not as a story, but as a quiet, living weight that didn't need proof when the sun finally crested the trees. The lake exhaled, the surface relaxing into something almost ordinary. And my phone went dark, the notes app empty again like it had never been used. I stood, joints stiff, and turned back toward the car with a steadiness that surprised me. Because I knew this wouldn't be the last time it tried, only the last time it would try this way. At home, I packed the letters into a box and buried them beneath the floorboards, where the house had always felt warmest. Not to hide them from myself, but to anchor them somewhere the calm couldn't sand them down. And before I sealed the board, I added one final page in the same hand. Dated today, not tomorrow, or 3 years from now. We're still choosing, I wrote. Quietly then. I put the board back and listened to the house settle. Wood sighing, shadows finding their places. And for the first time since the letters began, the calm didn't feel like a trap. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a small, familiar warmth curl against my side, the faint impression of a head on my shoulder, and I didn't speak, didn't turn, didn't name it. Because some truths are safest when they're carried without witnesses, and as sleep finally took me, I understood the real reason the letters stopped when they did, not because the future ran out of things to say, but because the message had been delivered, and it was simple enough to live by without incriminating what matters. Forget what hunts, and choose silence when love would otherwise give itself away.